Hey there folks, Wrel here. Today we're going to be reviewing the Zenith VX-5, which is a carbine for the Vanu Sovereignty. We'll break down these statistics, give you some tips on how to use it effectively, and hopefully help you make a decision on whether or not the Zenith is worth a buy. Throughout all this, you'll hear me comparing it to the standard issue Solstice carbine, because it's a weapon that everyone has, everyone knows, and it performs very similar to the Zenith with a few quirks here and there. The Zenith VX-5 is going to run you 1000 certs or 700 station cash to unlock. It'll deal 143 damage up to 10 meters and then drop off to 112 at 60 meters. This is your standard damage range for VS carbines, at least the ones that aren't specialized for close or long distance combat. Provided that all shots land on the body, that damage fall off means that it's 7 shots at 10 meters to kill somebody, 8 shots at 11, and 9 shots at the 40 meter mark. The Zenith has an above average rate of fire at 723 rounds per minute, or roughly 12.05 rounds per second. By comparison, your standard Solstice carbine fires at a rate of 698 rounds per minute, or 11.63 rounds per second. And if you look at the time to kill difference between them, provided all shots land on the chest and projectiles travel instantly, you'll drop your target in roughly 0.5 seconds within 10 meters, while the Solstice is going to take a little bit closer to 0.52. This is really not a huge difference, provided you don't have to let off the trigger and burst your shots. So what really draws the line as far as time to kill goes is the accuracy, which we're going to talk about in a bit. The Zenith has a 30 round magazine with 180 in reserve. It reloads in 2.18 seconds short, or 2.5 seconds long, and this is a decent reload speed overall, but it's only moderate when it comes to VS carbines. The Solstice, for example, reloads in only 1.65 seconds short, and 2.28 seconds long, so that's about a half second off the short reload, which is a big deal, and 0.22 seconds off the short reload, which isn't such a big deal. The projectile velocity is also a little bit lower than most VS carbines at 460 meters per second, and this takes a step toward emphasizing the weapon's role at closer ranges, because most VS carbines actually have a bullet velocity of 515 meters per second, which is a big difference. The standout trait though, the one that makes the Zenith carbine what it is that it has a 0.75 times movement speed multiplier while aiming down sights. Every other VS carbine carries the standard 0.5 times movement speed multiplier while aiming down sights, and faster movement means faster corner peeking, it's a bit more synergetic with thermal vision and higher range optics, and it's just a very desirable trait for weapons to have in general. I mentioned that the difference in damage output between the Solstice and the Zenith would really come down to how accurate they are, because if you have a less accurate weapon, you need to let off the trigger more to stay on target, and when you let off the trigger, you lose your rate of fire advantage, and when you lose your rate of fire advantage, then the whole theory crafting thing goes right out the window. The Zenith has a recoil pattern that's up and barely to the right. In fact, it pulls to the right about 3 times less than the Solstice. And the vertical recoil on the Zenith is 0.708 for the first shot and 0.295 for subsequent shots. This is a little bit higher than the Solstice out of the box, as the Solstice has a 0.7 recoil on the first shot and 0.25 on subsequent shots. The Solstice also has 0.2 horizontal recoil, which is nice, it's low, it's consistent, whereas the Zenith has horizontal recoil varying from 0.2465 to 0.2748, which basically means that even if you compensate for the weapon's recoil correctly, if you're dragging the mouse down in the right direction, the Solstice is still going to give you a more consistent and more controllable recoil pattern. The Zenith, fortunately, has access to both an advanced forward grip and a compensator, which will go a long distance towards mitigating some of those downsides, and they aren't as terrible as I maybe have made them out to be, because even with the unpredictable side-to-side recoil, the Zenith is still a very accurate weapon that can take advantage of that higher rate of fire without having to burst too much given the right effective range. It's just not as controllable as the standard Solstice. That said though, here is the more important part. The standard Solstice carbine has a 0.25 aim down sights moving cone of fire with a 0.05 bloom. Now the Zenith has a 0.35 aim down sights moving cone of fire with a 0.05 bloom. And this means that the standard Solstice carbine can fire 2 shots before its aiming cone of fire reaches the same size as the Zenith's. And that's a pretty big deal. Likewise, on the other side of the coin, the Zenith gets a hipfire advantage that's roughly 2.5 shots before it reaches the Solstice's starting hipfire. So the Zenith's hipfire cone of fire is just as good as the Serpent's, which is one of your close quarters carbines, and it also has access to an advanced laser sight. So why did I tell you all this in the first place? I know I kind of threw a whole bunch of numbers at you. And it's because if we take all the pieces, if we put all the pieces together, basically the Zenith is your crossover between the Serpent and the Solstice. Your standard starting carbine is going to be more accurate at longer ranges, whereas the Zenith is going to be able to take advantage of its strengths at slightly closer ranges. Still further away than the Serpent, but not quite as far as the Solstice. And this, along with the wide selection of attachment options, allows the Zenith to be very versatile. Speaking of which, the Zenith has access to scopes 1x through 4x, including IR and V. It can equip a compensator, a flash suppressor, and a standard suppressor, and it can run either an advanced laser, an advanced forward grip, or a flashlight. As far as suggestions go, you can really go any number of directions here, but for scopes, I tend to like the IR and V or the 1x reflex. I feel that the weapon is a little bit more suited toward closer ranges, though the 2x reflex should end up in the right ranges as well. For a barrel attachment, the compensator is just what makes sense to help keep your shots on target, but I honestly don't think that it's necessary to make the weapon work, so if you're looking to invest into attachments, leave the barrel as is until you unlock your rail attachment. And for the rail option, it really depends on what you find yourself doing more often. Aiming down sights, in which case you'd run the forward grip, or hip fire, in which case you'd run the laser. Personally though, I think that the weapon's largest downside is its horizontal recoil, so I'd recommend an advanced forward grip first and foremost. And given that the weapon has 0.75 times movement speed multiplier while aiming down sights, this is only going to play to the weapon's strengths. It's also worth noting that if you have a compensator equipped, it'll make your hipfire cone of fire larger, so if you are planning on being more hipfire oriented and want to use an advanced laser, then you might want to ditch the compensator in favor of a flash suppressor or nothing at all. As far as weapon-specific strategy goes, there's probably not a whole lot that I can say, but to just shoot them in the head. At longer distances, the weapon will be a little bit too inaccurate to land headshots consistently, but within about 30 meters or so, you should be striving for those headshots. If you don't go for the head, or if you don't get the jump on your target first, you're going to end up trading more often than you'd probably like. Even though the weapon does have a higher rate of fire, that rate of fire isn't so high that you'll cross the threshold of untouchability. It's not quite like an SMG or a close quarters carbine. To build on that, you want to use cover. Given that the Zenith is a carbine, you're either going to be using it on your engineer or your light assault classes. And if you are a light assault, you want to stick to the rooftops and take advantage of the ADS multiplier while you peek your targets. And the same thing with the engineer, except that you should be using your turret as a form of cover, especially the anti-infantry monoturret, as you'll have a nice little latency advantage as you move out from behind the turret with the trigger held down on your target's head. So to wrap things up, I think that the Zenith is a good weapon. It keeps you mobile, which helps keep you alive. It's got decent accuracy and damage output, but whether or not you'd want to trade up from your standard Solstice carbine, that's kind of something that you have to suss out for yourself. If you've already Araxiomed your Solstice and you enjoyed it and you're looking for a weapon that performs similar, then definitely pick up the Zenith. Or if you usually find yourself in close quarters situations but don't like the feel of the VX-6 or the Serpent, then the Zenith is the next best option, as it's going to give you a little bit more oomph without forcing you to deal with an incredibly long reload or a rate of fire that's going to evaporate your magazine. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you use the Zenith carbine and you like it or you hate it, or if you have any tips and advice you'd like to share, then leave that in the comment section down below so everyone can benefit. Thanks very much, folks. Wrel signing off.